Hello and welcome to Geeking Out About It. My name is Giguiere.
And I'm Sam Kuns.
And today we're here to talk about Invincible, the brand new Amazon Prime series that just came out a few months ago. Now, Invincible is about 17-year-old Mark Grayson. He's the son of the world's most powerful superhero, Omni-Man. And he is finally starting to get his powers at the ripe age of 17, and he starts training with his dad and learns that being a superhero isn't nearly as easy as comic books make it out to be.
Yeah, that is not the case for Mark Grayson. This series is actually really well done. It's an animated series that's premiering on Amazon, like we were talking about. And it's really quite clever in the way that it structures itself. It's not like any normal Marvel or DC thing. Well, it does have the elements of that because, well, being a superhero naturally comes along with it. It has its own style and taste, and it's kind of refreshing.
Yeah, it has its own identity, even when compared to another satirical, superhero style genre also made by Amazon. When you compare it to The Boys, it still stands apart because of its different themes and its much larger interplanetary scale.
Yeah, and you've heard us talk about The Boys before. We like The Boys quite a lot here.
Me and The Boys.
This kind of has that same kind of feeling to it because of the massive amounts of violence is what I would describe it as. But it's a lot more in line with traditional hero stories. While The Boys goes completely off the deep end, this one manages to stay on the right.
Yeah, The Boys focuses on the group of vigilantes who are working outside the law, but Invincible is still, at its core, a normal superhero story.
So odds are, if you like one, you'll probably like the other.
Nah.
Now, we should definitely go in and start talking about some of these characters because they're quite interesting.
Absolutely. Sam, why don't you start us off with Mark?
Well, Mark Grayson is our title card character. He is a young high school student who's just aspiring to be like his dad, who happens to be one of the world's greatest superheroes, Omni-Man. Now, Mark developed his powers a little later than was expected, but when he got it, he just really was trying his best to be like his dad. And he faces challenges time and time again, and he gets his butt kicked time and time again. Holy cow, did we see this kid get bloodied up a lot throughout this series. It's only a few episodes, but man, Mark is bleeding through most of it.
He goes through it.
It's not exactly the kindest of outcomes for him. But there's one thing that is for sure, and that it's Mark's spirit is invincible. And it's really compelling to watch him go through these struggles because, man, he has a lot of issues, whether it be physical or emotional problems.
Yeah, and of course he's still dealing with the normal, high school issues, trying to balance school and relationships and extracurricular crime fighting. It's a lot.
It is a lot.
Moving on, we've got Mark's father, Nolan Grayson, better known as Omni-Man. Omni-Man is the symbol of heroes on Earth, and with such immense power, he's capable of extreme feats. Unfortunately, that image of the shining hero isn't all it's made out to be. It is actually a facade for the Viltrumite army in order to get Earth into the Viltrumite Empire.
Now you might be thinking, who the heck are the Viltrumites? Well, basically, Kryptonians like Superman? They're all that, and they're stronger, theoretically, but they're not as fast, mostly just the muscle builds.
Yeah, it's like Superman, but bad, again.
Yeah, people really like making Superman remakes over and over again, but this one's quite interesting because they really focused in on the species aspect of it rather than the Superman aspect of it,
It's a little interesting that somebody who looks so much like Lex Luthor keeps making shows where people like Superman are the villain.
Good job, Jeffrey Bezos. Good job.
Jeffrey Bezos, Jeffrey Bezos.
All right, moving on. We have another character to talk about, and that is Adam Eve. And she is another one of these young heroes that is training up to be, and she's originally part of the superhero team called the Teen Team. And she works with Mark, and she becomes very close friends with him throughout the course of the show. And she has some really cool powers. She can manipulate matter and create objects and restructure the world around her to fit what she needs. and it's super cool. I like when she goes out and she just builds her own house. And it's just really interesting because I've always found powers like that to be kind of special.
Yeah, it's kind of like a Green Lantern power set almost.
Yeah, except without it fading away after a bit, you know?
Yeah, it's direct like matter manipulation. Speaking of manipulation, we are moving on to Cecil. Cecil is a government agent who works at the Pentagon and is tasked with overseeing and handling all the superheroes of the world. Throughout the comic book run and now the television series, Cecil has just bones of steel and is not afraid to back down from even an impossible task like going up against Omni-Man himself.
And lastly, we have Robot. Now, Robot is an interesting character throughout the show. He's someone that you probably wouldn't have expected to be as important as he is. His real name is Rudolph Connors, and they don't really let you in on that secret until a little bit later. But throughout the comic series, he will continue to be important, so look out in the show, keeping your eye on Robot. He gets up to a lot, and he's really clever about how he approaches situations.
Yeah, I found his side story throughout the first season of Invincible to be really intriguing, and I wasn't sure where it was going at all. I didn't realize he was going to be such a major part of the show.
Yeah, his incredible intelligence really drives portions of the show that you wouldn't have expected otherwise. And when looking to the intergalactic future of this show, it's really something to keep tabs on. Now you might be thinking to yourself, why should I personally go out and watch this show? Well, it's because while it is a standardized superhero show, you go and you click on episode 1 of this show, you start watching it all, it just seems really normal, and then you get to the last 5 minutes, and you are just absolutely blown away by how violent and awesome it gets in the last 5 minutes.
Yeah, it's enough violence and gore to make even the boys squeamish. What's a good way to put it? It's like if Omni-Man is a hammer and everybody else is a ketchup packet.
Jingle bells, jingle bells.
Bart! Why are you doing that?
Oh.
Exactly, that is the best way to describe it. They're not just a nail, no, they are ketchup packets and he is smashing through them. It gets really impressive at times with the visual art style that they start introducing, and when you see brains scatter across the floor, you know something's really wrong.
Yeah, it is insanely violent, but it's not just senseless. It's there to show the weight and the consequences of these powers. So, for example, like somebody with super strength, if they go to punch you in the stomach, then you know their fist will go through.
Yeah, this show is definitely not kid friendly, so don't go having your people under like probably 13 ever go near this thing. That is just our personal recommendation.
Yep. Now it's time for one of our favorite recurring segments on the show that's totally not brand new. Say it with me now, everybody knows the name. It's totally different from The Boys. It's a completely different concept and show. Please, I swear it's different.
A staple in this show.
Classic. Look, at first glance, Invincible and The Boys do seem pretty similar. They are both quite dark, and they're both kind of parodies of what we've come to expect from the superhero genre. They are also both made by Amazon. But while The Boys focuses a lot more on the current socio-political climate and exposing the corruption that money and power and fame can bring, Invincible takes a different path. Obviously, you have the father and son story with Omni-Man and Mark, but the Invincible also follows a more interplanetary scale. We see this touched on a little bit during season 1, when Mark meets with the rep from the Coalition of Planets on the moon, and when he takes a field trip to Mars to help out some astronauts. And it seems like seasons 2 and 3 are going to expand on this even further.
Boy, do I have more to add to that, because I did some research after hearing about Invincible on Amazon, because I didn't know Robert Kirkman's work. So I went back and I started researching it up, and the comic series is actually really huge. It ran from 2005 until 2018, and it is an incredible story that has a larger scope than most newcomers would realize. To put it in perspective for you, if you read the story in the massive compendium versions of it, which are 3 big novels, we are about 1/5 of the way into the story of book 1. That's right, we're barely even touching into this massive world that is going to be developed. There's so much more to learn about and explore, and not a lot of people would expect what comes next. I'm gonna be real. But it is fantastic. We've merely dipped our toes into this universe, and I implore a lot of you to go and check it out for yourselves.
And now, because I am not very familiar with the Invincible comic at all, we're going to tag team out, and Austin is going to tell us a bit more about the detail of the comics.
Jesus.
Hey, welcome back. You good?
Thought I got away.
Nope, instant transmission. Sorry, man. We need you to talk about some Invincible comics with me.
Okay, Invincible, like the show that was recently brought onto Amazon in an animated format, but it has been a long-running comic book series for a while.
Exactly, the Robert Kirkman one, yeah.
Yeah, okay, sure. What about it?
Oh, just what are some of the things that you thought were interesting in the comics?
I mean, these comics definitely make a lot of unique decisions, I would say, compared to other comic books. For one thing, it's a heck of a lot more galactic than anything else out there, I think. This is almost, the Invincible comic series is almost exclusively about alien civilizations that are so ridiculously overpowered that humanity never stood a chance in the first place, and it's just them fighting with each other to see who rules the world. That's one interesting fact about it. It definitely focuses a lot on that for most of the comics run, and even when they're spending time on Earth, it's almost always through the lens of this dude is an alien, or at least half alien. So that's pretty unique.
Yeah. The comic series itself has a long running, like I said, and it's pretty interesting at times, I think. There's a lot of really cool moments throughout the story. Like, it's always maintains its graphicness. Like, it's always super violent combats because you really feel like people are, like, close to dying. But then after a while of watching Mark get his guts ripped out, you start thinking, yeah, maybe he just can't die.
I suppose so. I know one thing that's pretty interesting about the comics is, well, that's interesting about the comics in terms of its animated translation, is we've actually seen a lot of arcs from later in the comic series be pushed into season 1 of the animated Invincible series. A lot of stuff that's supposed to happen later is happening earlier, and I'm wondering how they're going to keep that translation going. Hopefully they're going to take a few creative liberties with some of the finer points that I actually disagree with a little bit in the original comic line.
Yeah.
The original comic line is fairly pessimistic, pretty nihilistic, so I'm hoping they don't keep that up.
As it stands right now, though, the animated series, I feel like, is just making basic story improvements to the comic.
Yeah, it seems just better.
It feels like it's flowing better than the original comic storyline did. And it's also greatly due to the fact that Robert Kirkman is, in fact, working on the show.
Yeah, and he's getting a chance to do it again. He's doing it all over again with
it
edits.
started in 2005, so, you know, it's way back when he first started doing all these comic book stuff. So naturally, he's just making improvements as he goes along the way.
I'm an old person,
Yeah, we
I was
forget
7.
that. Yeah, I was 5 when this thing came out.
People watching this are going, you young whippersnappers. You whippers.
Yeah. Anyways, though, pretty interesting. I hope that a lot of the adaptations made get rid of some of the wonky stuff. Like, I was kind of sick of, in the comics, watching the same repetition in Robot's storyline particularly.
Yeah, Robots has the same thing happens to him, I think, 3 times.
Yeah,
basically.
3 times. Yeah.
I really don't approve necessarily of where he ends up either as a finale. No spoilers, but I'm hoping they change that a little bit because it doesn't. I don't like it. It's not necessarily untrue to his character, but I don't think it's a very. It's in no way uplifting.
Now, I will say this to clarify: the show that we see on Amazon Prime is definitely a clear adaptation of the comic books. And as always with adaptations of things such as the MCU, that version of it will always be a little bit finer quality.
Yeah.
Comic books are weird. If you didn't know this, comic books never make any sense. Like, even in the greatest of stories, like Ultimate Spider-Man, after a certain point, it starts getting wacky woohoo, and you kind of just have to go, what? And then they retcon it, and then they move on, you know?
And that point, Invincible is approximately the 2nd chapter.
The 2nd chapter? Really? You think that close?
Right after where we are right now.
So, right now, we're about 1/5 of the way through the first compendium book.
Yeah, and if you go into that next bit, it goes off the rails pretty dang fast.
It does. I know what you're talking about in regards to Omni-Man.
I'm
right?
really interested to see what they do with that one character.
No spoilers, but you like bugs?
I want to see how that gets translated. I want to see what it looks like in this new version. Although, that I will say, one of the best adaptations between original looks and cartoon look is this show. Invincible comic books look very similar to the actual animation, which is it's probably exactly because Robert Kirkman's working on the thing.
Now, I will say, though, that while I didn't know about Invincible growing up, I was more of a DC and Marvel fan, it was quite popular. In fact, it was popular enough to have crossover events with both of the respective companies. So we had times where Invincible ran into Spider-Man, and they had a multi-dimensional battle with the villain, and they just traveled through the comic verse following Mark Grayson trying to stop a villain. And it's actually kind of cool hearing about that, because it's like, wow, I just never realized that this was a thing, and now everyone's getting into it, and I'm also on that same boat of just exploring Invincible as a IP, so.
Yeah, you want to talk about wacky woohoo. Late-term Invincible goes so far off the deep end. It's not even funny how far they go. It's like, oh, we started out galactic scale. How do we ramp it up from there? Multiverses. A bunch of them. And then we'll come back to Galactic and do a war across all of it.
To be fair to Invincible, though, Marvel and DC did the same thing.
Yeah, kind of, but they took longer. To be fair to Invincible also, they only have the one main character, so.
Well, in that storyline. Yeah. Anyways, that about wraps up talking about comics. I'm gonna send you on your way, okay?
Will I go back to the same place I was, or do I just disappear?
Kind of a state of non-being.
A liminal state of half-being, similar to a state of sleep paralysis.
Exactly. Goodbye. He's gone.
If you think Invincible sounds like a show that you'd want to check out, you can find it streaming on Amazon Prime Video. And it's also been renewed for seasons 2 and 3 starting next year. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Geeking Out About It. If you enjoyed the show, be sure to subscribe to KBVR TV so you don't miss any new episodes. Also, be sure to check us out on social media. We've got Twitter and Instagram, and we're also on Twitch at twitch.tv/KBVRTV26. For Geeking Out About It, I'm Chance Giguiere.
And I'm Sam Kuns.
Thank you for watching.